My brother left me out there. 5 words. 5 words. And when I heard that, gang, when I actually heard those words come out of somebody's mouth describing what OG3 did to Ben 10, I had to sit with it for a minute, because we're not talking about a disagreement. We're not talking about a misunderstanding. We are talking about a man who looked at his brother, the same person he called family, the same person he claimed he would ride for, and turned his back and walked away while that man was fighting for his life. And then had the nerve to come back on camera talking about Ben is fine. Gang, Ben is on his deathbed. I'm gonna show y'all the clip. I'm gonna break down the response. And by the time this video is over, you're gonna understand exactly what kind of person OG3 really is. Y'all need to hear this. Let's get into it. To understand how we got here, and to really understand the weight of what OG3 did, we need to go back and establish who these two people actually are to each other. Because if you come into this thinking it's just 2 guys who had a falling out, you're gonna miss the whole point. OG3 and Ben 10 were not associates. They were not cool. They were not colleagues who moved in the same circles and called each other bro for the cameras. These were brothers, real ones. The type of bond where you know everything about each other, where you've been through the lowest moments together, where if somebody came at one of you, both of you moved. That was the understanding. That was the agreement. Not written down, not stated in any contract, but understood, the way real loyalty is always understood, through history and through action. And for a long time, that's exactly how it looked. OG3 and Ben moved like a unit. When things were good, they were good together. When things got complicated, they handled it together. The people around them saw it. The people who knew them saw it. The relationship looked airtight. But here's the thing about relationships that look airtight. The real test isn't when things are easy. It's not when there's no pressure, no cost, no sacrifice required. The test is the one moment where everything is on the line and staying hurts. That moment came, and OG3 failed it. Let me break it down for you. Now, to understand why the abandonment hits the way it does, you gotta understand the situation Ben was walking into. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't Ben stumbling into something he had nothing to do with. This was a situation that had been building, tension that had been mounting, and OG3 knew about every single layer of it. That's the part people keep glossing over. That's the part that makes what happened so much worse than it already looks. OG3 wasn't uninformed. He wasn't caught off guard. He knew the temperature of that situation. He knew who was involved. He knew what the energy was. And he walked into that space with Ben, which means he made a choice to be there, and then he made a second choice to leave. 2 separate decisions, both of them deliberate. Because here's how the streets work, fam, and I'm gonna explain this for people who might not fully understand the dynamics at play. When you show up somewhere with somebody, you are making a statement. Your presence is a statement. You're saying, this person is with me and I'm with this person. That's the signal you're sending to everybody in that space. So the moment OG3 walked in with Ben, he extended his protection to Ben. Whether he said it out loud or not, whether he even consciously thought about it or not, that's what showing up together means. And then when things escalated, when the energy shifted, when it became clear that Ben was about to be in real danger, OG3 withdrew that protection without warning, without giving Ben a chance to adjust, without even making sure Ben knew he was gone. He just left. And Ben, who thought he had backup, who thought his brother was standing right there, found himself alone in the worst possible moment. That's not a mistake, that's a betrayal, and there's a real difference between those 2 words, but that's just the beginning though, because abandonment is one thing. What happened after is a whole different level of wrong. Here's where it gets crazy. The abandonment happens. Ben is out there alone dealing with consequences that were never supposed to be his to deal with alone. The situation plays out the way it plays out, and at this point, there is still a path where OG3 comes out of this with some semblance of dignity and tact. He could have reached out immediately. He could have made sure Ben was okay before anything else. He could have been accountable in private before anyone even had a chance to go public. He did none of that. Instead, the clip drops. And gang, when this clip hit, when the footage of somebody describing exactly what OG3 did started circulating, it spread the way only real, verifiable truth spreads. Because you know what doesn't go viral? Rumors, speculation. He said, she said. That stuff burns fast and fades fast because it doesn't have the weight of reality behind it. But this clip, this had weight. You could feel it watching it. Somebody who was there, somebody who saw it firsthand, laying out exactly what went down. OG3 was there. OG3 saw Ben was in danger. OG3 chose to leave. Play the clip? clip plays, someone describing OG3 leaving Ben alone in the fight. Let it breathe. Don't react immediately. Then, I'm not gonna say a word for a second because I want that to sit with y'all the way it sat with me. He knew. That's the part right there. That one detail, he knew what was happening. That is the line between a mistake and a betrayal. A mistake is you didn't see it coming. A mistake is you were caught off guard. You froze. Things moved too fast, and before you could act, it was over. That happens. That's human. But knowing, seeing the situation escalate, understanding that your brother is about to take the full weight of something he was never supposed to carry alone, and still choosing to walk, that's a decision, a cold, calculated, self-interested decision, and it tells you everything you need to know about who OG3 actually is when the cameras aren't rolling and the reputation isn't on the line. But wait, it gets worse, because now OG3 knows the clip is out. Now he knows the streets have seen it. Now he knows his name is attached to one of the most cowardly moments anyone in their circle has been caught on. And what does he do? He responds. And now here's where people started connecting the dots. Because when OG3's response dropped, the internet didn't just react. They analyzed, line by line, word by word. And what they found when they looked closely was not an innocent man defending himself. It was a guilty man performing innocence. And there's a very specific difference between those two things that I need to walk y'all through. Because a lot of people watched the response and thought, okay, he's explaining himself, let's hear him out. And I respect that instinct. Innocent until proven guilty, everyone deserves to speak their piece. But when you understand how guilty people construct their defenses, the response reads completely different. Let me break it down for you. 3 layers. Pay attention. Layer 1, the excuse that doesn't hold up. The first thing OG3 does in his response is provide context. He says there's more to the story than what the clip shows. He says things happened before that moment that explain why he made the choices he made. And here's the thing, gang, that could be legitimate. Context matters. There are situations where a clip genuinely doesn't tell the whole story. I'm not so one-sided that I can't acknowledge that. But here's the reality. If there was legitimate context that explained the abandonment, if there was a real valid reason that any reasonable person would look at and say, okay, I understand why he left, that context would have been the first thing out of his mouth the second that clip hit. Not a day later, not after the internet had already formed their opinion, immediately. Because that's what innocent people do. When you're falsely accused of something and you have evidence that proves your innocence, you don't sit on that evidence, you don't wait. You come out immediately because every hour that passes without you speaking makes the accusations look more true. OG3 sat quiet for days, and then when he did speak, the context he offered was vague. It was unverifiable. It was the kind of explanation that sounds like something in theory but doesn't actually address the specific question everyone is asking. Why did you leave Ben alone? The excuse doesn't hold up. Moving on. Layer 2, the deflection. After the excuse, OG3 pivots, and this is where I genuinely had to pause the video because the audacity level was stratospheric. He starts talking about Ben, not talking about Ben in a concerned way, not, I'm worried about my brother and I want people to know the real situation. He starts talking about things Ben supposedly did, old situations, old beef, things that happened weeks, months ago, things that have absolutely nothing to do with the specific moment captured in that clip. And this is classic, fam. This is textbook. When you can't defend what you did, you make it about what the other person did. You muddy the water. You introduce enough old information and old grievances that people start to lose track of the original question. But the streets knew better. Because you know what nobody in the comments was talking about after OG3 brought up all that old stuff? The old stuff. They were still talking about the clip. They were still asking the same question. Why did you leave Ben alone? Deflection only works when people let themselves get distracted. And the people watching this situation were not distracted. Layer 3. Ben is fine. And this is the one. This is the moment in OG3's response that, no cap, genuinely made me feel a type of way that I don't feel about internet drama. Because internet drama is internet drama. People say wild things, situations get exaggerated, I'm used to filtering out the noise. But when OG3 looked into that camera and said, Ben is fine, gang, Ben is on his deathbed. We are not talking about someone who took a rough situation and bounced back. We're not talking about bumps and bruises. We are talking about a serious, deteriorating situation that people close to Ben are genuinely scared about. The people who actually know Ben, the people who have eyes on his situation right now, they are not using the word fine. So either OG3 is so disconnected from Ben's actual reality that he genuinely doesn't know how bad things are, which means the brotherhood he keeps claiming doesn't exist in any practical sense. Or he knows exactly how serious it is and he's choosing to downplay it for the sake of his own narrative. Keep it 100 with me. Which one sounds more likely? Because I know which one the internet landed on. What happened next shocked everyone. Not because the response was surprising in content, anyone paying attention could see that deflection coming, but because of the speed at which the public saw through it. Usually when somebody drops a response, you get a news cycle. You get 24, 48 hours of genuine debate. Some people buying the story, some people pushing back, the comment section's divided. That's normal. That's how these things usually play out. OG3 got maybe 6 hours. 6 hours before the consensus hardened. 6 hours before the majority of people who were watching this situation made up their minds. And they didn't make up their minds because they hate OG3. They didn't make up their minds because they're Ben's fan base riding for their guy no matter what. They made up their minds because the evidence was there. The clip was there. The timeline was there. Ben's condition, visible to anyone paying attention, was there. And against all of that, OG3 offered vague context, unverifiable excuses, and a "he's fine" that anyone with eyes could see was not true. The internet went crazy when they started laying it out side by side, the clip versus the response. What OG3 said versus what people close to Ben were actually saying about his situation. The contrast was damning, not because people were being unfair, because the facts didn't line up. And then the voices started coming out. People who knew the situation, people adjacent to the circle who had been quiet up until that point. People who, once the response dropped and it became clear that OG3 wasn't going to give a straight answer, decided they were done staying silent. And what they said, what they confirmed, made the clip look gentle. Because the clip showed one moment, one decision on one night. But the people who started speaking after the response painted a picture of a pattern. This wasn't the first time OG3 had put himself above the people he was supposed to protect. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was who he was when the cost was real. Real, recognize real, gang. And the real ones in this situation were not on OG3's side. Meanwhile, and this is the part that genuinely hurts to talk about, Ben's situation kept getting worse. While OG3 was doing damage control on social media, the person at the center of all of this was not getting better. The person who needed support, who needed his circle to show up, who needed the people who claimed to love him to stop managing their reputation and start managing his reality. That person was being failed, again, in public, in real time, for everyone to watch. Let me talk about the bigger picture for a second, because this situation, as specific as it is, as personal as it is actually a story that plays out over and over again in the streets, in friendships, in families. And if we just treat it like drama, if we just consume it like content, we miss the lesson. Here's what this situation is actually about. It's about what happens when the performance of loyalty gets mistaken for actual loyalty. Because OG3 was good at performing loyalty when it cost nothing, when it was easy, when being seen with Ben, calling Ben his brother, moving with Ben, when all of that was a positive thing for his brand and his reputation. He was right there, loud and present, posted up. But loyalty, real loyalty, the kind that actually means something, isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you do when staying is painful, when there's a real cost, when your own safety, your own reputation, your own comfort is genuinely on the line. That's the test. And OG3 didn't just fail the test. He didn't even stay in the room long enough to attempt it. And now he's trying to manage the fallout with a response that doesn't answer the question, combined with a Ben is fine that insults the intelligence of everyone watching. Y'all need to understand what Ben is fine actually communicates in this context. It's not concern, it's cover. Because if Ben is fine, then the abandonment had no serious consequences. If Ben is fine, then OG3's decision to leave didn't really hurt anyone. If Ben is fine, then OG3 can walk away from this looking like a guy who made a questionable decision in a high-pressure moment rather than what he actually is. A guy who left his brother to face something he wasn't supposed to face alone, and whose brother is now suffering consequences that should never have fallen entirely on him. Ben is fine is not a statement about Ben's health. It's a legal defense. And the fact that OG3 is making it, the fact that that's where his head is at while his so-called brother is on his deathbed, tells you everything about his priorities. This ain't no game. People's lives are real. Ben's situation is real. And when someone is genuinely in a bad way and the person who was supposed to be closest to them is on camera minimizing it for clout protection purposes, that's when this stops being content and starts being something that actually matters. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what should happen next or exactly how this resolves. But I will say this: the people in OG3's circle, the people who know what's really going on with Ben, need to stop letting that "he's fine" narrative breathe, because it's dangerous. When you tell the world someone is fine when they're not, you give people permission to look away. You give people permission to stop checking in, stop reaching out, stop doing the things that might actually help. You create a false sense that everything is handled when nothing is handled. And that silence can cost a person everything. So let me keep it 100 with y'all. No filter, no hedging. OG3 is wrong. Not kind of wrong. Not wrong, but you can see his perspective wrong. Just wrong. The clip is clear. The timeline is clear. The response made things worse instead of better. And Ben's current condition, which is not fine by any definition any honest person would apply, is the direct consequence of a chain of events that started with OG3 choosing himself. That's where the evidence lands when you look at all of it. But here's what I also want to say, because I'm not just here to pile on without purpose. There is still time for OG3 to do the right thing, not to fix what happened. You can't unleave someone. You can't take back the moment. What's done is done, and Ben knows what happened regardless of what OG3 says to the internet. But there is a version of this where OG3 stops performing, stops managing optics, stops with the Ben is fine narrative, and actually shows up for the person he claims is his brother. Not on camera, not for content, not for a redemption arc that plays well on social media. Actually shows up, actually checks in on Ben's real condition, actually takes accountability to the one person whose opinion on this actually matters, Ben himself. That's what a real one would do. The question is whether OG3 is a real one, and based on what we've seen, the jury's out, but the streets are watching. Real recognize real, and right now the real ones are not recognizing OG3. Here's where we land. OG3 left Ben 10 out there. That happened. It's documented. It's not a rumor. It's not speculation. There were people there who saw it, and one of them went on camera and told exactly what went down. OG3 responded to the clip with excuses, deflection, and a Ben is fine statement that anyone paying attention knows is not true. Ben is not fine. Ben is dealing with real consequences from a situation he should never have had to face alone. And the person who should be at the front of the line making sure he gets what he needs is currently more concerned with his own public image than his brother's actual condition. That's the story. And what makes this bigger than just two people's drama, what makes this worth talking about, is that this story repeats itself constantly. In friendships and families and crews and cliques all over the country, the person who performs loyalty when it's free but disappears when it costs something, the person who's loudest about brotherhood until brotherhood requires sacrifice, we know that person. Most of us have experienced that person. OG3 is just the latest example of what that person actually looks like when the moment comes. And Ben, wherever Ben is right now, whatever he's going through, I hope the real ones in his life are showing up the way OG3 should have shown up, because that's all any of us can ask for. Someone who stays. Gang, if this video gave you something, if it made you think, made you feel, made you see this situation different, hit that like button. Real ones show love. Subscribe if you're new. We break down the situations nobody else wants to touch, the way nobody else is willing to touch them. No filter, no agenda, just the real. And drop in the comments. I want to know what y'all actually think. Is OG3 lying when he says Ben is fine? Or does he actually not know how bad things are? Because both answers are bad for different reasons, and I want to hear where y'all land, and I'll be in the comments. Let's talk about it. Slow down. Don't cut yet. One last thing. But actually, before I go, I want to say something to the people who've been rocking with this channel since the beginning. Because y'all know we don't do this for the numbers. We don't sit down and make these videos because drama is fun or because somebody's pain is content to us. We do it because these situations matter. Because the people involved are real people. Because silence on things like this, pretending it's not happening, looking the other way, letting the he's fine narrative just sit there unchallenged, that silence has real consequences. That's why we're here, that's why we make these videos, and that's why I need y'all to share this one. No cap, share it. Send it to somebody who doesn't know what's going on with this situation. Send it to somebody who's been taking OG3's response at face value. Send it to somebody who actually knew Ben and needs to understand what's really happening, because the people around him aren't being straight with them, because that's what this channel is for. Not just to entertain, to inform, to make sure the real story doesn't get buried under a PR response and a he's fine that nobody who actually knows Ben believes. And look, I know some of y'all watching this are OG3 supporters. I know some of y'all came in here ready to fight me in the comments. That's fine. I genuinely welcome that. Bring your perspective. Bring your receipts. If there's something I missed, if there's context I don't have, if you were there and you saw something different, say that. I'm not too proud to update my position when new information comes in. That's the difference between this channel and everybody else. We follow the truth, not the narrative. But what I will not do is pretend that what we saw in that clip is anything other than what it is. What I will not do is let the Ben is fine narrative slide without pushing back on it. And what I will not do is stop talking about this until Ben's actual condition is being addressed honestly and openly by the people who are supposed to care about him. That's a promise. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody who needs to see it. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely read them. Not just the ones that agree with me, all of them. And if you've got a situation you think we should be covering, drop that in the comments too, because the next video is already in the works and we are not slowing down. Real ones know where to find us. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.